Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shub, and together with my partner and co host Patric, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Hey Patrick, back again. And are we talking about nothing at all this time? Feels a bit like that.
I do think so. I mean, you and I, we had our usual 60 seconds
Yes.
preparation. And we said there's so many fundraisings ongoing, both, where we're keeping busy as well as where founders that we've partnered with in the portfolio are keeping busy. And there seems to be a repetitive question coming up within our portfolio. How do I pick a VC to join us on the cap table and lead my next round? And so this actually triggered us saying, hey, why don't we talk about that? How to pick your next VC?
I think sounds like a great topic, and also sounds like a topic about nothing at all. Because what can be more nothing than the profession of VC? You know what I mean?
And VCs talking about themselves.
Exactly. That's
Now
as
what?
meta and inception levels stuff.
Ooh.
As navel gazing as it gets.
What could be interesting about this one, though, and this is the truth. You and I don't think we've ever spoken about this question with each other. So literally, this episode will be exploratory. Me learning how you think about this, and hopefully vice versa. So it's perhaps unique and interesting that way, that it's truly exploratory. So yeah, part of that is, I guess me beginning to ask you, Shub, how should a founder that you work with think about picking their next VC?
I mean, so I think there's so many different places to start. One anecdote that comes to my mind is, and I don't want to take the name of the company here because I don't want this to be construed as that person criticizing other VCs that they have on their cap table, but extremely successful company in our portfolio will soon go public. So I'd met him recently, and I just had a discussion with him on, hey, what do you think about all the VCs you have on your cap table, right? Was generally, how's it going? How does this?
You were fishing for compliments when you asked him, right?
I was. I didn't quite get the level of compliments I was hoping. I must admit, right? I will honestly acknowledge that. There is one investor there was high praise. Let me again not name them because by exclusion perhaps the others will feel slighted. But there was one investor which was specifically called out for high praise. But the general commentary made for almost all other VCs, especially ones with larger AUMs, was there's a surprising lack. In fact, there's a surprising absence of any sort of knowledge or understanding for what it takes to take a company public. So what I mean is, the insights, if you can call that insights, usually start and stop with, hey, what will it take to get to the next round? What will it take to get to Series B, etc. But when you try to have the discussion on, which is, and it is particularly profound considering this founder and this company's profile, because the company is about to go public. When this founder tries to have this conversation on, hey, what will it take to go public? It's like this very random cacophony of feedback, which is like not making sense, randomly keeps changing. So no VC actually takes the time to think, what will it take for a company like this to go public? What should it look like? Which I thought, wow, right? If that is the case, and in full transparency, I don't know if I've given it enough thought myself. I may be thinking of it more in terms of future, in terms of outcome sizes, what the firm should represent. Maybe I have not nailed it down to that level of specificity. Although with that said, obviously we had Fundamental also come in much earlier.
Yeah.
So for us, and it's not necessarily the most relevant KPI, if I may say that, but if you're managing billions and stuff of that sort, then I think at that point, if you're not doing it, you're definitely doing a disservice both to the founder as well as to your LPs.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's hard to blame the seed state investor on your cap table. It's obviously an expectation you should have from the last investor in the growth rounds on the cap table. So I guess what you're saying is, back to the question, like should you expect from your next VC? Well, if you're growth stage or like early growth stage, make sure you're actually onboarding people who have gone through the IPO journey and who can take you by the hand and don't have to like spitball around and kind of make stuff up on the fly.
Or look, whatever your desired outcome is. So for example, it's also completely valid and a viable strategy is that you want to exit because what you're building is of immense strategic value to a pool of acquirers. But then has the VC that you're planning to go with, do they have some understanding or knowledge of facilitating that sort of transition, that sort of change? I think that's an important, by the way, there's a difference between them experiencing that process because as we've discussed before, construction tech is nascent. So that again, the actual knowledge may be relevant or may not be. Sometimes that can also create biases, but at least do they have a clear point of view, what the outcome would look like, what the steps might look like?
Got it. So my first answer, and again, we're exploring together here, right? So it will take us in corners and directions. My first answer and like the big thing that guides a lot of my advice from experience is Vinod Khosla famously said something akin like, hey, 70% of VCs don't add value. I actually think he's underestimating the problem. I actually think that 70% of the VCs are detrimental to your business in B2B.
So I think eventually quoted him right. So what he said is 90% of the VCs add no value. Yeah. And 70% of the VCs actively add negative value or actively.
Then he and I agree. Okay, then he and I agree. Yeah. Glad you corrected me because that's exactly my intuition based on experience. And I do think, by the way, that ratio differs whether you're building in B2C or in B2B. So I think in B2C, the path before has been trodden down so much more, and the playbooks with which you can find success are so much easier to come by. Plus, the investor oftentimes, we keep saying this on Practical Nerds, investors are more successful at picking category winners when they have personal empathy for the category.
Yeah.
And in B2C, most investors will be good consumers because they have enough money to spend.
Yes.
They might have children that are consumers, etc. Right? So in B2C, I think the ratio looks perhaps more favorable. In B2B, it's very, very poor. So that's the first piece of advice to any kind of founder. Don't think about the brand at first. You can add that layered later. Don't also, as the very first criterion, think about value add. As the very first criterion, think about no harm. Not standing in my way, not giving me shit advice as opinions or worse, forcing them actually onto me. Just make sure that you do references about the person, not about the firm. Yes. You can do those later. But make sure that the person that you would be picking is actually not standing in your way, not giving you harmful advice and not forcing it onto you. That is the number one thing. And unfortunately, I was saying to this founder team earlier, the 70% actually stand in your way and are harmful. And of the other 30%, 15% will literally just not be there for you, which is a good first step because they don't harm you. And the other 15% will be those who will actually add value. So let's make sure you're first in the 30% bucket. Like that's the first thing. Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm sure people can't believe what we're saying here. It's the absolute God's honest truth. This is exactly what the market looks like.
I think it's a very, very valuable point. It is, and I'm sure you've also seen this. Once you've come across a founder who's either on a repeat journey or they're now in a business that have found some scale, understand how the fundraising process, VC interaction process works, it's sort of like a well understood joke internally between everyone that VCs don't add value. It's just we're just going through the motions, doing these board meetings, and it's a chore, etc., etc. And unfortunately, that's kind of like how they see a lot of interactions with so many VCs.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the root causes, we've discussed it here, we've discussed it at length in our new letter on the new website, fundamental/philosophy, is that the organizational setups that many, many VC firms have over time let creep into themselves breed employed investors. And so if you pick an employed investor, you can still have a great person, but the chance that you're getting someone that has an incentive set that differs from yours is a little bit higher, right? So your incentive set as a founder is you want to build a fantastic business. Usually you don't want to build a narrative. There are those, but in general, most great founders will be great founders because they actually build great substance into the business. But if you now have on the other side or in your board, the next investor is an employed investor, their incentives are much more likely to be hunting great news, finding reasons to get that next promotion. Even, by the way, if they are what I call partner in name only. There are firms out there who will try to fool the market by calling everyone a partner.
Yeah.
Or even, more than that. Well, but internally, do they really have equity? And
So
if so, how much? So the incentives change.
So I think this is like one side of the same coin. I think the other side of the same coin was actually, again, articulated very well by Vinod Khosla, literally in the same interview that you referenced earlier. What he mentioned is there's been a weird trend in venture over the years, and I think you and I have noticed that being a very rampant trend, in fact, in venture, that there are just way too many people now in venture from literally all at all stages who are in this situation where they are quote unquote advising portfolio companies or on boards, etc. And if for some reason someone is not put in a position where they're on the boards or advising companies actively, they take it as a slight. And in that interview, Vinod even represents response saying, hey, you haven't earned the right to advise a founder. In other words, unless you have some sort of experience or empathy, as you call it, or some sort of reason as to why you would have authority in that area, hey, you haven't earned the right to advise founders. Because just, I think if I remember correctly, that interview he mentioned, just because you've got an MBA doesn't give you the right to advise, give targets or give wise opinions to founders on how they should build their business.
Yes.
And I think that's another thing, advice I would give to founders: if the kinds of conversations you're having seem like they're being read off a generic script or like a standard templatized process checklist, which a firm would run, you're probably not getting a flavor for either the person who's diligencing you or the firm. And that's not a good thing because that process does not account for your bespoke nature, your unique pattern, and therefore it will not appreciate your unique strengths and weaknesses as a firm and your areas of improvement in the future.
And that's something where to be very wary, because I think there's VCs in general, our industry, and then perhaps certain subsets of that even more so, is in general prone to making embellished statements and doing more appearance than perhaps substance. And unfortunately, it can be very hard by someone that is used to working like that. It can be very hard for a founder to actually make sure that because it's said in a certain way, that there's actually substance behind that, and it's not just the appearance of substance. It's very hard to differentiate in an industry that is used to doing that. And I think one of the best questions as a pressure test that you can ask as a founder to a potential person that you pick, again, not the brand, the person that you pick is, hey, tell me what you will tell me in the future that you have no competence on. Tell me now. And if a person actually can't give you a specific answer, I would say run. Because that means that either, best case, they haven't reflected about themselves and they haven't discovered it yet. That's not good, but it's still the best case. But worst case, they actually think they're good at everything, and they will be the ones who not only will give you an opinion or advice on everything, but they will actually also then give you harmful stuff, not from a real place of empathy or authority. That's why I absolutely love vertical VCs that have not when they start, because most vertical VCs, when they start, they still need to earn a lot of insights and learnings. But after, whatever, second fund, third fund, and spending years and years in a space, at that point, they typically have earned some empathy and unique insight that you can count on, that you will just know is highly likely to be correct. It doesn't necessarily translate into the company building types of learnings that you need as a founder, but you will need both typically when you're in a B2B type motion. Whereas the generic investors, sometimes they think that because they have seen sector A, B, C, they will make certain conclusions about sector D and then start advising. And when an investor, when you ask him that question or her that question, they will say, hey, actually, these are the things that I know, but I don't know how they will translate into your sector. So that's where I will stop and I will not give you advice. That's a person you want on your side. Yes. That is a very highly self-reflected person.
And I think that ties in very well with the point I was going to make next. So when we spoke about founder traits we love, we spoke about founders who are comfortable with being vulnerable about their weaknesses, about where they need help, they need improvement, where there might be business weaknesses, what the uncertainties or risks might be around in the business. I think the same applies to investors as well. Great investors will have the maturity and the self-awareness to call out where they have deficiencies, or there are limits to how they can support the company post-investment. Yes. Or frankly, even maybe limits to how they diligence the opportunity from a technical understanding perspective.
Yes.
Which I personally respect a great deal. And I think, but it's a very, very small set of investors who will have the humility to acknowledge that. Because for whatever reason, I think VC, and we are sort of in this cocoon where we believe we have to present ourselves as the most knowledgeable of them all, right? Never acknowledging any failings, etc. I would actually say, if you're a founder and if you come across VCs who are upfront about the limitations of their abilities, are prepared to be real with you, be vulnerable with you, show the real side, it's a fabulous sign.
I agree.
Yeah.
I have actually learned over my years, probably more in the second half of my career so far, not in the first half. I do not trust people who don't know their own limitations. They are not to be trusted. Not because they are necessarily malignant or anything. It's because they will be overconfident on everything. And when it comes to making 10 decisions that matter this month, it's the shit advice that can set me up on the wrong trajectory. So having someone that will tell you they don't know it is much more valuable than having someone give you some kind of spitball advice.
Yeah.
I do remember this must have been like 3 years ago, one of my portfolio companies, a top tier investor came in after us. First board meeting after that investor came in, they were discussing with the founder on the board some generic company building stuff. It had something to do with basically setting aside certain compensation budgets and for a specific type of software engineer group back then. And then the founders asked me, Patrick, what's your opinion? And literally I said, I don't have enough experience for this. Let me not comment. Literally I said that. Moving on. And that's exactly what you need to have in a group, right? So there will be people who have competence on something, then say something, otherwise move on.
Yeah.
100%. That's important.
Yeah.
So I would say, that's on the broader question, you're picking the person really, and you want a person that doesn't stand in your way and that doesn't add harm. What about the value add of the person? Like what should a company look for? Which is like that rare additional element.
Look, so I think, so in essence, we're talking about the 10% here. How to do the 10%?
For me, it's 15. For Vinod, it's 10.
Okay. Look, I think let's first maybe outline how value add is typically presented by VCs, and why, at least in my opinion, it's just process and burden, right? It's frankly nothing more than that. I think it's often presented as, hey, we have these board meetings, we have a ton of operational oversight, we'll give you strategic guidance, we'll make introductions. I guess introductions, I would say, in most cases, assuming they're good introductions, are a genuine value add. To be honest with you, at early stage, a lot of the stuff, the manner in which board meetings are conducted and the format, there's enormous room for improvement. I think they're structured in a way where it's meant to be burdensome. Or let me flip it around. This is not a call to say board meetings should not happen. But in the best companies and the best founder VC interactions, there is a very fluid, almost an osmotic way of information exchange in the way in which things happen, where things kind of happen seamlessly. And you're not waiting for this board meeting for stuff to either be revealed or discussed or some decision to happen or some sort of guidance or for that to be the reason bonds are being made or not made, etc. And I think also often board meetings, because of the ceremony of it all, if it is indeed there's a ceremony about it, are unfortunately also used as a forum by investors to say that, hey, you know what, now we can tell you what to do, or this is what you should be doing, etc. Which definitely at early stage is not how I think it should be the format.
Not at all. The founder will have 100 to 1,000 times more information.
Yeah, correct. So I think that is unfortunately how the 70/90% of the VC, that's where I guess the pretense of value add gets lost in either a no loss territory or causing a harm sort of situation. I think I think different VCs take different roles. I think one role where VC, a good VC genuinely has an advantage and should extend that advantage to their portfolio companies, especially if they're deserving, is high quality intel, high quality referrals and introductions, and just market signals, not operational guidance, not operational advice. You can give advice, but signals. And if the founder is competent, they are actually best equipped to take the signals
exactly
and deal with them in the best manner.
But that can also be then tilted and distorted in the founder's mind. So if you overthink the value add, you already see in how we're kind of progressing through this conversation completely, by the way, unplanned, unprepared. We're literally, Shub and I are exploring this together. But you can already see like, hey, first make sure they're not going to stand in your way. Then make sure they are not giving you shit detrimental advice.
Yeah.
And then you can think about, if you have eliminated those two in the person that you're picking, that perhaps you're going to get some value add. Yeah. And so if you kind of flip the sequence and you're over prioritizing the value add, you could get someone that gives you occasional value add, but still has all the other two problems.
They could, yes.
That's exactly right. So I think that's the first takeaway. So get the sequence right. Secondly, when it comes to value add, I'm actually flabbergasted, right? So spoken thousands and thousands of founders. You, the same thing. Shub. For me, to this day, no founder has asked me, Patric, what is your personal superpower that I can count on? How often have you been asked, Shub?
Not too many times, but I have been asked a few times.
Yeah?
Not in as many words, but with a different choice of words. Something broadly seeking the same message.
But in the meaning.
Yeah.
I have not asked. I've not been asked that way. Perhaps it's a European thing. It's such a powerful question because you force someone to actually verbalize in what situation you can add tremendous value to them. And if someone gives you a lot of things or they give you broad generic statements, trust me, then there's not even one single superpower.
Yes.
100%. Because right?
Yeah.
It's such an easy, powerful test. The second follow-up question is, okay, great. And now what is the superpower of your team, your colleagues, your firm? Boom. You will know immediately in what instances you can rely on them.
I think the fascinating thing, I would bet, in maybe more than 90% of the cases, when a question like that is phrased to most VC professionals, the answer is not answered in the first person. The answer is on behalf of...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And 50% of the times the person will cite the brand.
Yes.
Run. If that's all you, I mean, sorry, no, I shouldn't say run. If you have like two equal options and one of them gives you something specific and the other gives you like this answer, then run from that answer and pick the other one. That's perhaps more nuanced. Because if you have someone that already you've made sure they're not going to stand in your way and they're not going to be detrimental, it could still be a good pick. But then, perhaps you're just not getting the value add that you were hoping for.
Correct, because they're still at least in the 30%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which, I mean, believe me, it can already be good enough. Yeah. And so, but actually, Shub, glad you double underline this because I want to bring it back to something bigger. So the founder community is a little bit at fault here. Because the founder community sometimes places just way too much on, I need to have constant value add from my investors. First of all, make sure they're not standing in their way, then make sure they're not adding detrimental parts to it, and then perhaps you can get some value add. Secondly, there is no investor in this world, there is no human in this world that will constantly add value to what you're doing. If you're in B2B, you will have so many nuances to crack.
Yeah.
You would be looking for Superman or Superwoman. It's impossible to have that kind of an ask for any person. And so if that's what you're expecting by overthinking the value add question, you will be raising such a high bar that everybody will underperform against your expectations.
Yeah. In fact, I would say I would also flip it. And this is not to say that I personally am averse to helping or supporting folks I partner with. But hey, look, I mean, at the end of the day, each of us is an individual, a person, and we have our individual motivations and desires.
Yeah.
Would I want to go on an easy track or on a difficult track? If I'm presented with two options, let's say for the purpose of this discussion to, all else held equal, if one takes more of my time to deliver the same outcome, and the other takes less of my time to again deliver the same outcome, I would rather go with someone who can figure things out on their own. And I can just support in a less way. So I'm not saying I'm completely hands off, but I also don't want to be completely like neck deep in the other situation unless I'm getting a decent reward.
No, but also because it doesn't work, right? I mean, as I said, the founders will always have 100 to 1,000 times more information than you. And so it's actually impossible to be an operator. Actually, here's a red flag of a type of investor that I would advise my founders to run away from 10 out of 10 times. 10 out of 10 times. And that is the former unicorn founder operator turned VC. I can swear to you 10 out of 10 times when things hit adversity, this is the type of investor 10 out of 10 times that will think he or she can fix the problem. And that's when they get super involved with not enough information. And that is problematic.
So let's break this down a little bit because I think there's a lot to unpack here for our viewers and listeners. So you're saying someone who previously was a founder, let's say, or someone senior at a unicorn, now they've exited, etc., and now they've set up their own VC firm, right?
Yes.
So this is fascinating because at least...
And now you have a time of adversity.
Interesting. So let's unpack this. I don't think I actually have a firm point of view on this kind of situation, but I'm taking it as a theoretical problem statement. So let's say it at least fits, Vinod Khosla's definition of who has earned the right, let's say, to advise entrepreneurs.
On specific topics, I would qualify. There's no person that has a right to advise on anything and on everything.
Gotcha. But you're saying, anecdotally, what you've seen is they run away when adversity hits.
No, they get involved when adversity hits. Because the problem that you have here is, and again, it has to do with the information asymmetry, right? So they could potentially be terrific founders again, but then you need the amount of information that you have and you need the governance for it to work, right? So, but the problem here is that you will have someone that will want to get involved 10 out of 10 times, but they have 100 to 1,000 times less information than you. And that creates a very troublesome cocktail of adversity where you already have adversity in the business and now you have adversity coming from the other side as well.
Fascinating. I am trying to think if I've come across instances like that. Okay, I can think of one group. I don't know if that's also the group you are thinking of. But anyway, we won't take names here. But maybe that group might be a common thread. to
Yeah.
this theme.
Yeah, I can think of a few where then the unicorn type founder goes more sailboating and actually does not get involved and is too remote and too far away from the business. That at least is not standing in your way and not loading harmful advice onto you. So what I've just been pointing out is like this very active type of
Yeah.
GP or angel. It works with angels, by the way, too.
Yes.
If they are actually highly involved and highly bought into what you're doing, that can create a very dangerous situation. That's why I generally favor purebred investors that understand the vertical perhaps or understand a specific function of my business extremely well and who have signed up for my journey because they are highly excited but who still have other projects to care and tend about. For example, I share one cap table with an angel and previously a VC that I respect a lot. And the problem with that person is highly opinionated, doesn't have the information about the sector, but always has an opinion about the sector and has almost no other projects anymore. So that person actually went into this company with, I think, 1 or 2 million of his own money. And he said, the only reason why I even did this one is because I absolutely love this founder so much and because I want to be in the very few companies that can become $10 billion. So that person is over-invested. That's the problem. So you have a highly opinionated person that has no clue about your vertical, and the next moment this company will hit adversity, I can already set my clock against it.
Yeah.
Will hit adversity, that person will be highly involved and highly opinionated.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, since you brought up the topic of angels, do you have a point of view on what kinds of angels to take on or not, etc.?
I mean, in general, I think actually the value add you founders get from angels is actually way worse than what they are expecting from VCs. But it doesn't matter if there's like one moment in my company's life where against that check from an angel I can cash in and I can get one great piece of advice or one great introduction. It's absolutely worth it. So that's why I also think I wouldn't overthink the angel question. In general, I wouldn't expect too much of it. I think the best optimization that you can make is having 2 buckets of angels. One of them is like vertical angels and the other one is company building angels. The vertical angels are the angels that you can call upon for a specific type of insight of a specific task, subset, function of your industry. And you'll use it quite frequently, actually, from what I've seen. But that runs out after 1 or 2 years because you will, after 1 or 2 years, be smarter with your company than that angel will be because you have collected so much more specific knowledge and insight. With the company building angels, there I would go extremely picky because like VCs, professional angels who do this repeatedly are very good at embellishing their own accomplishments and their own expertise. And I would go reference, and pick 1 or 2 about 1 or 2 functions that I feel like perhaps I need help hiring for, etc. How about you?
I would say for me, the vast majority of good angels or worthwhile angels don't have enough time to give specific advice. At most, it may be, I don't know, a couple of sessions a year or something like that. So I think the crucial value add, therefore, from good angels is their Rolodex of high quality contacts that hopefully they can connect you with and their reputation in the market. And I think if it fits the criteria, it's a good addition, useful addition, or at the very least, no regret move. I think when there are angels who, referencing the example you brought up, who get extremely invested in the business, are super excited, I would be a bit careful about bringing such angels on board because I think they treat it a bit too much like a pet project and try to get too involved. And that could be a recipe for disaster.
Agreed.
Yeah,
I would be careful about that. So yeah, I mean, honestly, what I'm learning from this is that first make sure no one stands in your way. Then secondly, make sure they don't give you shit advice and they know when to shut up. And thirdly, when it comes to value add, don't over expect much. And I think that would be my kind of parting conclusion here is, think reflecting about myself, like what would I like a founder to say, hey, why would I want Patric as my next VC? I think the company lifetime, when we get invested from a pre-seed or seed stage, is going to be 10 years plus. And I don't want to be taken on board by a founder because they say, hey, in the next year, Patric is for sure going to make that difference for me. That, I like to think that's the case, but it would be a bad reason for me. I would like to have the reason by the founder because they say, hey, after the 10 years, at one point in time, I have conviction that Patric will have changed my trajectory. Could be in year 1, could be in year 3, it could potentially be in year 7, right? But at one point in time, there was a trajectory changing moment with him because of most likely some vertical specific insight. Company building within the vertical, distribution within the vertical, product within the vertical, network within the vertical, right? Don't come to me when you want to discuss, what is how often have I gotten asked by founders, hey, Patric, what should we allocate percent of our ESOP to an independent board director or to an advisor? My answer is always the same. No, you shouldn't. But if you do, don't ask me. Ask one of your generic investors who see this more than me, right? And that's not trajectory changing, and that's not something where I have a unique or differentiated insight. So for me, pick me if you have conviction that over the 10 years lifetime, there will be 1 or 2 moments where I'm changing a trajectory. I will always be there, of course, right? But you don't expect from me for every moment to be trajectory changing. It's just not possible, because if that were the case, then after a year, a trajectory would be 90 degrees steep. And that's not possible.
I haven't thought about this question for myself, I must admit. I like how you articulated it. I think the way I think of it is also because I tend to play different roles with different kinds of companies, if I may admit to that. So, for example, with some other founders, believe it or not, I've even evolved to just being like a philosophical coach or almost a therapist sometimes. So I'm not kidding. I've actually played that role. I do play that role with one of our high-performing companies where I've actually gone in saying, hey, you know what? Business is phenomenal. There's no need to discuss that. Let's talk about how you're feeling, right? And it's amazing. Literally, that person has never been asked that question, right? By any other, and that immediately gets them to talk about so many things they've never talked about, even the burden of entrepreneurship, right? What we don't talk about, which is a bit of I wouldn't say it's an epidemic because not too many people suffer from it, but there's also the cost of being a successful founder. When you're in the growth stage, you have made many sacrifices to get to where you are.
Yes.
And unfortunately, because again of what we've built of the VC and startup culture, you don't expect someone to come in a board meeting and start talking about the sacrifices they've made, right? So where do they go if they want to have such a discussion, right? So sometimes I play that role, believe it or not. So the role I often do, so in typical setup, so this is of course an exception. In a typical setup, the kind of role I would play is, hey, you do your business. That is not my specialization, but I will help you be as smart as possible with all other intel and norms and ways in which you could visualize the future. I will give you whatever is on my mind on an ongoing basis. And that's my promise to you, right? And at the very least, if you fail, it'll not be because of lack of intel or lack of inspiration or something like that. So in other words, all on you if you fail, right? And if you scale up a lot, then I'm happy to switch roles if there's any bottleneck. So for example, if the bottleneck is in your mind, if you're feeling pressures, I will switch my role to unlock that bottleneck for you, hopefully.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think I can take a slice from that as well. It's pretty cool.
It's interesting, I can tell you. I mean, it's very, very real and a very different kind of conversation.
That is pretty cool. I still harp though on, I think the mature-minded founders, and especially those who've perhaps gone through a venture-back journey before, etc. You can sometimes see some fade out of VC or some realism setting in, and that's healthy. Because it's very unrealistic to expect a trajectory changing moment, a value add moment every week, every point of every touch point, every month, etc. It's just not how your company is going to develop. So why would you expect that from anyone, let alone someone that has less information than you? You need to think of this relationship as the intersection of timing or moment in time. You're lacking something and that person has something.
Yes.
And at that intersection, there could lie a trajectory changing moment. And you need to wait patiently for it. Just because it doesn't come immediately doesn't mean it's not going to come in the future. That's how you have to think about it. And if you constantly want to like the circle of timing, if that in your mind is like every month or every day or right now, you will always be disappointed by any kind of investor relationship. It just won't work that way, right? So for me, that's what I'm striving for. And to be honest, I've had such relationships where founders have told me, hey, you've really changed my trajectory at that point. I've had that multiple times. But sometimes perhaps it's only coming after many, many years when that triple intersection hits. And then one final piece, it shouldn't, founders, look for someone who is fun to work with, who you actually enjoy the process with. The process is arduous enough. You shouldn't spend it with people who actually don't make you enjoy that process. Seriously, I can't overstate how useful that criterion actually is.
Absolutely. I mean, I know there's jokes made about it and people also say it seriously, but it is true that the average VC founder relationship is unfortunately longer than the average marriage. So yeah, you might
unfortunately for two reasons.
Unfortunately for two reasons. Yes. So you might as well be with someone who is going to make it a fun journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that goes both ways, huh? I mean,
absolutely.
So none of the reasons should actually be, we've discussed this, Shub, now. Hey, like, how should I think about picking my next VC? I mean, if you've listened to this episode, there's very little reason to pick the brand, and there's all the more reason to pick the person.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. I kind of enjoyed this unprepared discussion.
I liked it too.
Cool. All right, Shub, I know you're flying to India. What are you up to? What's going on?
So 2 separate events, which I think it's the first time I'm doing that in my life. 2 separate events in the same week. So feels a bit wild, crazy, and frankly very uncharacteristic of me. So there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I do one this year. So
good for you, man. Good for you. Oh, dude.
All right, sir. Then I'll see you when you're back. We'll make sure that the Practical Nerds engine keeps churning out. So we'll definitely make that sure. But nevertheless, travel safely.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.